now we can move on to our second speaker. She also comes from LabBuddy, Tineke. She is a e-learning developer and also the head of e-learning at LabBuddy. And she will give us a talk today about teaching skills and e-learning, the life of an e-learning developer in life science field. And she will have a two-part talk. In the first part, she will talk about what it's like to be an e-learning developer, and then you can ask your questions. And then we move on to a second part regarding job applications. Tineke, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Renata. So again, let me share my screen. I'm Tineke. I'm an e-learning developer at LabBuddy in the life science field, and that's really because of LabBuddy being an e-learning tool in the field of life science. So first, let me introduce myself. Currently, I am the head of e-learning development at LabBuddy. I started working here about 7 years ago as an e-learning developer. And as the years passed, the company grew and we hired more e-learning developers, and we now have a team of four people working at creating those learning materials for universities and universities of applied sciences that would like to enhance their laboratory education using our tool. So a bit about my past. I did a bachelor in biology, also at Wageningen University. And I took a minor in education, and afterwards I did my master's in biology, and I majored in ecology. And next to my studies, I also had some part-time jobs, and I will tell a bit more about that later on. And it's funny because I always used to say about myself that my specialism is generalism, which I now learned that says about himself as well. So as Renata mentioned, I will tell you a bit more about what it's like being an e-learning developer, what skills come in handy, how you can develop these skills, and also, because that's an important part of the job, what it's like to work at this small startup company. Afterwards, I would gladly like to answer your questions and then move on to a second part where I will tell you a bit about job applications. So we recently had a vacancy and hired a new e-learning developer. So we have recent experience with this. So at LabBuddy, it's the mission of the e-learning developer to enable the teacher and the student to get the most out of the laboratory education of the teacher. So from day to day, this is the goal that is set out for the e-learning developer at LabBuddy. And how does the e-learning developer do this? By tailoring the LabBuddy tool to the needs of the teacher, but it's not only the needs. LabBuddy is also based on these educational principles. So it's also about applying these principles into the learning materials. It's about the course, of course. LabBuddy is not a standard tool. The way it works is that teachers run a course, hear about LabBuddy, think, hey, this is an interesting tool. Maybe we can use it in our education as well. And then the e-learning developer together with the teacher designs this learning material and tailors LabBuddy to the contents of that course, in which, of course, also the learning outcomes are very important. So maybe to make a comparison, so there are many courses on molecular biology. So then the practical will be about a DNA analysis. And it differs so much on if the emphasis of the learning outcomes is that the students learn these principles behind this technique, that they can troubleshoot if a PCR reaction has gone wrong, if they can identify how. But sometimes the emphasis is on the gene that is investigated. How can you find a mechanism of gene expression, and how does it relate to the phenotype? So then the lab work is the same, but the learning outcomes are different. And that's the challenge also for the e-learning developer, to really listen then to the teacher as well, and to really keep those learning outcomes in mind. So what are the tasks of an e-learning developer? The main task of an e-learning developer at LabBuddy is to create these actual learning materials. And these are based then on the course contents that that the teachers provide us with. And whilst doing that, applying those educational principles that the LabBuddy is based on. But it's not all, because you can have a good e-learning material, you can have a tool that works well, but LabBuddy is not a replacement of the teaching. So it's also very important that the teachers are also empowered, equipped to use the tool LabBuddy, and to apply these principles that we apply in the learning material, that they apply them in the course as well. So it's like a three way interaction, that it's the students, the tool, and the teachers that are all relevant in having a successful use of the tool LabBuddy. And then a final task, which is a minor task, is to deliver functional support. Of course, as you can imagine, if there is a teacher who has been using LabBuddy for several years, maybe there's some content that needs to be changed, or a teacher is not sure how to design what he has in mind himself, then the teacher can ask us, and we can help the teacher doing that. So that's also one of the parts of being an e-learning developer. So what does e-learning development entail? And this is actually also what I recognize from Koos' talk, is that being an e-learning developer, and that's also why I like this job so much, is because you find yourself in the midst of teaching, of being busy in a digital environment, and working on the subject matter. So as I mentioned before, I myself studied biology because I find it interesting. And now as an e-learning developer in this life science field, I can actually still use all the knowledge that I learned during my education, and also that I find interesting. So let's zoom into those three parts of the e-learning developer's skill set. First, I would like to dive in the teaching skills. So in teaching, it's important that you want the students to achieve a certain learning outcome. And the way you can help the students, how you can teach the students, is to, on the one hand, give instructions. And for example, this can be information, like how DNA is coiled up into chromosomes and how these chromosomes are in the cell nucleus. Or it can be procedural information, like this is a pipette. You can adjust the volume. You have to do these actions in order to transfer liquid from one to another. So that's where it starts, with instructions. But then equally important is giving feedback. So this feedback tells the students if they have achieved the learning outcome already. So, for example, in the theoretical example, you could ask the students, can you tell how DNA relates to chromosomes? And then if the student gives the right answer, you can say, yes, congratulations, you understand correctly, you have achieved the learning outcome. Or if the student gives a wrong answer, you can say, no, that's incorrect because, and then guide the student to actual where you want them to be. And of course, this is regarding procedural information as well. So for example, if you see a student working in the lab and handling a pipette all incorrectly, and you fear that the pipette will be broken, then of course you can give feedback to the student and say, you're handling it incorrectly, you should do it like this or that. Or maybe equally important, you can give the student feedback, yes, you are doing it correctly, you are handling it the right way, actually confirming that the student has achieved this learning outcome. So teaching is about giving instructions, giving feedback to the purpose of the student achieving a certain learning outcome. Then how can you know if you yourself would like to develop those teaching skills? Well, as I mentioned in my introduction, I did a minor in education myself. And the reason that I did that is because I like the psychology of learning. How does it work? How does it work for myself? If I don't understand something, and then I work on the contents, and then I start to understand, how does that work? I find that interesting. And also I like explaining things to other people. So if you recognize this in yourself, then maybe these teaching skills are for you to develop as well, in which I would like to emphasize that if you decide to go and develop these skills, that it's very important to be intrinsically motivated. Is it something that you like to do? Go ahead and do it. If you say, no, this is not for me, then why should you? So how can you develop those teaching skills? So for example, maybe you could work as a teaching assistant. Maybe you can apply at your university to design learning materials for a certain course, or maybe you can supervise a lab course. So that's often done in universities, that students from last year get to supervise a lab course that's run the next year. And this will help you develop teaching skills. And of course, what you can also do is do courses on education or pedagogy if they are available at your university. During the education minor that I did, I also got to do an internship at a high school. And I really wanted to do this internship because I wanted to find out if teaching in front of a class is something that I would like to do once I would finish my studies. So if you're curious as well, if you want to experience that, I really recommend doing an internship. For me, the conclusion was that it's not a place for me where I shine. So secondly, an important part of being an e-learning developer is having these technical skills. So during my internship, I found out that standing in front of a class is not something that I like to do. And as an e-learning developer, you are sort of a teacher, but you are not standing in front of the class, but you're working behind the computer, actually teaching the students by building these learning materials. The reason that I say that these technical skills are important as an e-learning developer is because you're working in technical environment, a digital environment, and these can also be a complex environment. So it comes in very handy if you are handy with computers, so to say. Also, LabBuddy is designed as a very flexible tool where we can give feedback on the actions of the students very specifically. So if a student selects answer A, for example, we can give feedback, and if a student selects A and B together, we can give feedback to that, A and D. So we can provide very dynamic feedback, leading to LabBuddy being complex too. So it comes in very handy to have these technical skills. So if you would say about yourself that you like working at a computer, that if you like logics and puzzles, then I'd say I would like to challenge you to develop these technical skills. And you can do this, for example, by doing a course in programming or in modeling, maybe. I don't know if these courses are available at your university, but for example, I did a course in ecology where we built models about how animals behave while they are grazing, for example. So then the topic isn't technical per se, but the way you have to think, and of course you are working in this software that you are not acquainted with, really help you to develop these technical skills. Also, building websites is a very useful way to develop technical skills. This is actually one of the side jobs that I had next to my studies, which I still are very happy with in my work today, because LabBuddy is a web-based tool. So a lot of the knowledge that I learned when building website, I actually still use in my daily work. And maybe doing a data analysis. I can imagine you do a lot of research projects. And if you have to analyze a large data set, making proper tables, proper graphs, all those actions help you to develop those technical skills. Then the other part of the e-learning developers skill set, of course, for the e-learning material that we design, we need to understand the courses. And during my education, I studied biology, which is a very broad study, of course. I actually built this broad foundation that I still need in my work today. So it's not, by this I don't mean that you know everything, that you're not a specialist, but you have this solid foundation on which you can actually build new knowledge and new skills. So for example, I now in my job as an e-learning developer have come across quite a few practicals in which students had to do protein analysis. And during my education, I did never a protein analysis in the lab. I didn't do an SDS page. I didn't do Western blot. I also did not know these techniques. But of course, when you study biology, you do know about protein synthesis, about how proteins are produced in the cells, how antibodies work, how the immune system works, and all this. And because of this groundwork, because of this foundation, I was able to understand those new courses as well, and make learning materials for the students. So if you have a broad interests, if you are a quick learner, then maybe it's something for you to do as well to broaden your foundation in subject matter. And you can do this, for example, by taking courses that are outside of your study program. I remember that I did a course on health, which was about the inflammation response in cells. And we also studied these histology slides where you can actually see what's going on in the tissues, which I did not need for my ecology major, but still it helps me in my job today in cell biology courses, for example, that I can relate to the knowledge that I learned in that course, which was not a part of my study program. And another way to broaden your foundation on subject matter is to visit events like the ones organized by the ÖGMBT, or to go to talks or presentations on topics that are maybe not directly related to your own study program, but you do find interesting. So zooming out a bit again, being an e-learning developer is in the life science field is a really nice combination of teaching on the one hand, working behind a computer, making these puzzles, designing these materials, thinking about what choices will the student make and how do I design proper feedback to bring the student from where they are to the actual learning outcome where we want the student to be, whilst also still working with the subjects that I find interesting in the life sciences. Then maybe what is a bit missing here is what's also nice is working as an e-learning developer is that our clients, our teachers are academics. So the leap for me from going from a university to this company wasn't very large because I still talk with academia from day to day. So that's very nice to work with because it's people like me, people I know. So that's the most about being an e-learning developer. But being an e-learning developer at LabBuddy is also working at this small startup company. So as I mentioned, I joined LabBuddy 7 years ago. And my main task is building these learning materials. But when I joined LabBuddy, there was no road. So that's why I put the image of the road here. There was no road. We made the path. There wasn't a path. There wasn't a system set out for us. So that's the nice thing of working at this small new company. You really get to invent the system. Along the way, we developed this implementation process, this way in how we start a project, how we work together with the teacher, do meetings every 2 to 3 weeks, and guide the teachers towards doing a practical course with LabBuddy. So that is challenging, but it's also the fun bit that you get to actually invent your own job, and also reinventing it along the way, reinventing as the company grows. So that's the end of the first part of my talk, and I would now like to hear if there are any questions about either being an e-learning developer or working at a small company like LabBuddy.
Thank you, Tineke. Thank you for explaining so nicely about what your job implies. Can you maybe briefly tell us how a normal working day looks for you?
Yes, yes, I can. So a normal working day for me, it's not just e-learning development. And that's also because of working at this young company, and also because, of course, now I am the head of e-learning development. So a normal working day for me would be, so teachers supply us with the course manual of their course, and what we then do is take this manual, read it, and then design, for example, interactive questions based on those materials that we get. So often I spend a lot of time on designing these questions, and also writing the feedback, formulating the answer options. So that's very like detailed work, really being busy with the course contents, and then always relating that to what is the goal, what is the purpose, what do we want the students to learn. So having discussions with teachers is also an important part of the working day. And also project management, which is then a part of my job as a head of the department, is to plan the projects to see if there is enough work to do, but not too much for the e-learning development team.
Thank you. And we have a question from Andrea. In your education, you said you learned about learning psychology. Is there any course covering learning psychology?
Yes, so it's not. I think in any education course or pedagogy course, you will learn about the psychology behind learning, because it's very important to know how information is handled. And that's also one of the e-learning principles that that LabBuddy is based on, is that from research, the result was that people are only capable of processing small amounts of information at a time, and that actually translates to the e-learning material that we design as well. That we chop it up in chunks, because we know that the psychology is that you can't handle more information. So we apply that in how we design the learning materials. So I'd say in any education course or any pedagogy course, you should expect to learn about the psychology, yes.
And there's another question. How much freedom you have in your time management? I'm guessing it's about how much time you have for your family.
Right. Well, of course, I'm not the entrepreneur here. So I'm just a simple employee. So that's managed quite well. Of course, we have deadlines. So we have, when we start a project, it should be finished in time. We make an estimation of how much work we think it is, so we can actually plan quite well if we have enough people to be able to do these projects. So if we can see in the distant future that there is too much work, then we should hire new people, and by this also managing our time.
Yes, thank you. Elena also thanks you for the talk, and she has two questions. Before changing from being a biologist to e-learning development, did you do any course on that apart from the one from university?
No, I did not do courses on e-learning development. I'd say I think my the education minor that I did already gave me a lot of insight in how to design learning material. And of course, the tool LabBuddy is designed based on these certain principles. So I got a training, of course, when I joined LabBuddy, and all our new e-learning developers also are trained on how to design learning materials.
Mm-hmm. You're not thrown in the cold water.
No.
And can you recommend anything if you want, for example, to be more involved in teaching? What can you do?
If you want to be more involved in teaching, I'd say to go to a teacher that you had yourself from a course that you liked, and ask if you can work there as a teaching assistant, maybe, or to help improve the course, or in any way.
And another question from Elena is that if you are also involved in programming, or are you primarily responsible for the project management and scientific content?
Yeah, so I'm not involved in the programming, but of course, as an e-learning developer, we work a lot in the tool. Also, we talk a lot with the teachers, so you could say that I'm indirectly involved, because then we tell the software developers. We give them ideas for improvement from the experiences we take with us when working in the tool. So our main responsibility is to develop these learning materials for the teachers.
All right, thank you. And if there are not more questions for this part, I think you can continue with the second part of your talk.
Yes, we'll do that then. Thank you. So the final bit of my talk, I would like to spend on the way I see job applications. I want to tell that from our perspective, but also maybe from your perspective. And at the end, I'm curious if there may be some experiences that you have regarding job applications that you would like to share. So maybe you can think about that already. So if we have a vacancy and there is someone who applies for this job, then we find it very important that this person is intrinsically motivated to work at LabBuddy, that the interests of this person match with the job description. I think it's very important to be intrinsically motivated, because then you will like your job. And if you like your job, you will do it well. And of course, it works both ways. It's fun to do it well and to like your job. Also, we look at the potential of people. If an applicant comes and doesn't, from the question before, you don't have to know how to design learning materials yet when you apply for a job as an e-learning developer at LabBuddy. But of course, it's about your potential, about you being able to do it in the end. So I'd say if maybe you see a vacancy that has your interest, but you think I can't do it yet, then I'd like to stimulate you to apply anyway, because it's more about your potential than you being able to do it already. Then we also look at who is the person sitting in front of us. So I always used to think a job is about liking the job itself and being able to do it. But I've heard so many stories, and now it's from my own experience as well. That's only one part of it. It's also about the people you work with, about feeling at home. that's actually very important in the job that you are going to do, I'd say. And this also relates to the talk that Koos did about the values. Do your values match with the values of the company? And of course, the other way around. If there is an applicant, do the values of this applicant match with our company? And often we ask our applicants about examples. So for example, so a question that we would ask during a job application is, how do you handle conflicts? And then, of course, you as an applicant can say, I would like to handle conflicts by talking to the person, etc., etc. But it doesn't say anything about how you actually do it. It tells us something about how you want to do it. So therefore, during job applications, we always ask for examples. Can you share a story from your past? Can you share an experience from your past that shows us how you deal with conflicts, for example? Then, from the other way, I would like to really emphasize that a job application is not an audition. It's about the company getting to know you, but it's equally about you meeting the company. So I'd like to say, and I know it's not easy, and it's also not forbidden don't be nervous, just be yourself. As I said, it's not an audition. It's about you getting to know each other, and this can only be done if you are yourself. And I know during the job application, the job interviews that we did, I know my colleague who was present there always likes to ask some nasty questions. Don't get discouraged by that. So the interviewer might test you. Just respond as you want to respond, and don't go thinking what the desired answer is. Answer how you want to answer. Also, it's good to ask questions. So, for example, during the interviews that we did, we also had someone who wasn't acquainted with the LabBuddy tool. So this, I can imagine, and it was very abstract for this person, what the job would look like. So she asked us, and we could tell her, and then she got a better understanding of what a job at LabBuddy would look like. Also, try to think if your values match with the values of the company. Maybe you can even discuss this during a job interview. And then, related to what I just told before, give examples. So if the one who interviews you doesn't ask for it, share examples to make a stronger point, I think. About who you are, about how you handle situations, about what you like. Give examples that show them how you feel about that, who you are, and how you handle these situations like that. So that's the end of the part about the job applications. I'm very curious if you have any experiences with job applications that you would like to share. Or maybe if you have any questions.
Thank you. So if you have any questions or any experiences to share, please either unmute yourself or raise a hand. I have very few. I only have one interview. Luckily, I was successful, but I do remember that I was extra nervous. And it was really hard because it was also online. So maybe that was also something that was even harder because it was, or maybe it's easier for some people because then you're in your own environment.
Did you prepare for this, it being online?
I tried, but I didn't know exactly what to prepare for. You go through this basic things that you need in an interview. What are your strong qualities? What are your weakest ones? But this giving examples, I really like this. I didn't think about it, to give an example in order to emphasize the quality of yours. So thank you.
Yeah,
for
it
this
also
advice.
shows you that you really understood the question. We also, for example, had an applicant who there were quite some spelling errors in his letter, but we were curious to meet him, so we invited him. And then he said about himself that he was a perfectionist. And I didn't understand, because from his letter, I got a total different impression. So then it really helps to ask, what do you mean? Can you give examples that show that you are a perfectionist? And also for doing these online interviews, then it's also harder to see if you match as a person to the team.
Yes, it is hard, because at least being in person, it gives you I don't know, there's a different extra things that you can also perceive besides just the talk. And anyways, you don't have such a long time. It's not always easy to really form a bigger picture about the person that's interviewing you or the one you're interviewing. I'm trying to follow if there's any raised hands, but I see one. Just
yeah, that's me. Hi,
my name is Elena.
Hi, nice to meet you. I just wanted to share one experience that I had, because I was once interviewing for a student job, basically, for a summer job, and I specifically wrote in my application that I'm looking for a summer job for 2 months during the university holidays. And they invited me to an interview, and then they were actually looking for a student assistant that would work for a whole year during the week for 20 hours, I think, or 15 hours. So it was completely different to what I was actually looking for. And they afterwards were also asking me about feedback on the interview process. And I was also wondering if you're doing something like that, and what you would do in such a situation if you notice during the interview that it's just not really suitable.
Yeah, so in this situation, you mentioned that so the time period that you are available doesn't match at all with what the company or the job wanted. So if that would happen during an interview that I would be doing, I think I would point it out and discuss that, because that's a major deal breaker, so to say. And if it's already those logistics that don't match, then it also doesn't really matter if you match as a person to the job profile, I'd say.
Yes, I agree. I was just really wondering why they even invited me to the interview, if they were trying to convince me to still take the job, or I don't really know.
High expectations. Did you talk to them about that?
No, I did not really ask them why they invited me, but I thought maybe they didn't read my application in detail, because I was specifically adding that information, and that's what I was applying for. So I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elena. I don't see any more raised hands or any other questions. In this case, I want to thank you both, Kos and Tineke, for your presentation, for your time. It was really great learning from your perspective as an entrepreneur and e-learning developer. I hope the participants got also an insight in these jobs and more ideas about the possible career choices.